Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be presenting at the seminar today, organised by HIV Scotland, who are quite rightly putting the spotlight on what AIDS Scotland considers a critical issue. We welcome the Scottish Government's national strategy, A Connected Scotland. We feel this is an important moment in raising the profile of and response to what is clearly a growing social and public health issue. I was going to talk about the definitions around loneliness, but Tom's done that for us in his introduction. So, moving on, Will Wright, in his TED Talk, says that loneliness is literally killing us. There is evidence now that tells us that loneliness is as damaging to your health as obesity or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We know that it's linked to depression and anxiety, and there is evidence to suggest that it can contribute to heart disease, strokes, and cancer. And this really isn't that surprising, is it, if we think about it? I think most of us now realise that we don't put our emotional health in this box over here and our physical health in this box over here. And I think we all recognise that during periods in our life when we feel stressed or we're going through an emotionally difficult time, sometimes the first thing that we're aware of is, oh, my skin's playing up. My tummy feels a bit acidic again. I think that reflux is back. Why am I waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning with my mind racing? So we recognise that our emotional health is linked to our physical health. And if we've worked in the mental health field, as I have, then that is really apparent. And I remember when I was with Link Up Women's Support Centre, and we were working at that time the mental health strategy 2011 to 2016 was called A Sense of Belonging. And that really kind of resonated with me at the time. I really kind of used that phrase quite a lot because I thought it was really captured that sense of what is important to us. I mean, yes, we are individuals, but often our social identity can be defined by our sense of belonging to something, whether that's, our family, our friendship group, our walking group, our lunch club, our walking football, the list is endless. And out of that whole strategy, this sentence stayed with me, and that is that social identity is a fundamental aspect of what it is to be human. So loneliness is a major issue today. And at AIDS Scotland, we know that 100,000, oh, I've got it here. There's a moment, a light bulb moment. I'm so pleased I realised that. What we realise is that 100,000 older people in Scotland feel lonely all or most of the time, that 200,000 are going half a week without a visit or a phone call. We know that over 250,000 older people's main form of company is the TV or indeed their pet. I'm going to skip the video if that's okay. So, now, older people clearly don't have the monopoly on loneliness. It can come at any time in our lives. But there's no doubt about it that many of the triggers for loneliness tend to congregate in later life. Bereavement, especially the loss of a spouse or a partner. And actually, since I've joined AIDS Scotland and through our About Dementia forum, I've actually been talking to lots of carers groups, and certainly carers, full-time carers looking after elderly parents. another huge loss of role, really, when the parent dies. Moving home, particularly if you're moving to a new and unfamiliar community. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we get to a certain age and we all start thinking about downsizing. And, you know, if that's not being motivated by getting rid of the mortgage, as we kind of get a bit older again, it could be because actually the garden's becoming quite difficult to manage, and actually the house feels a bit echoey, or indeed maybe our family are encouraging us to move nearer to them. You know, come down south, Mum. You know, we can keep an eye on you. Well, it's all good intentions, but for many older people, it actually means that they're leaving what is familiar to them, and they're leaving a community in which they've had their own families. Children, I mean, for those of us that have children, they grow up and they move on, and you have that first wave when maybe they're in their kind of early 20s, but then some of our kids will go on to work globally, across the world, they'll meet partners, and they'll move away. Retirement is a big one. Retirement can mean not only the loss of status and identity, but also dislocation from a professional network. And finally, of course, as we get older, all of us could experience some loss of capacity, especially sensory and cognitive. And I think, you know, for me, when I think about sensory impairment, I think about my father-in-law at, you know, kind of his and my mother-in-law's sort of golden wedding anniversary, and the realisation that he wasn't being rude. His hearing aid wasn't working, and he was just in this, I mean, how lonely can you feel when you're at a party in a crowd and you can't hear what's going on? And it was just, again, it was like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with Alan? Right, he actually can't hear anything. So, and also mobility's a big one. You know, if we start to lose our ability to kind of move and get out and walk, then we are going to become very socially isolated. And I think before I move on to the next slide, I felt that this was also a moment just to acknowledge that for all of us, really, the biggest challenge that we face is that those who are most at risk of loneliness and social isolation are often most hidden from us. Because by definition, they're frequently spending a lot of time indoors. There can be a real loss of confidence in terms of getting back out and reconnecting with social activities in the community. And I think it's also, we need to be mindful that it's quite stigmatising, it's quite hard to say, I'm lonely, can I have some help, please? So, at this stage, I'm going to talk about HIV Scotland and what HIV Scotland is doing to tackle loneliness. And don't worry, I'm not going to tell you everything that HIV Scotland is doing. I've just picked a few themes, and I'm going to just give you a few examples of the type of approaches we're using to tackle loneliness and isolation amongst older people, which is one of our key strategic priorities. So, raising awareness. So I think what I want to say here as well is that another one of our key priorities is actually to challenge the very negative narrative around ageing. One of our key aims is actually to kind of, I suppose, be a platform for all that is positive about getting older. A lot of people find it really liberating as they move into this different stage of their life. But I think it's fair to say that many people experience an increasing sense of invisibility. Some would say that culturally we celebrate youth and beauty. And indeed, as we become more invisible, so our loneliness can become more invisible. And I think that's even to close family and friends. So I'm in the privileged position now where I can get out, it's part of my day job, and I can talk to older people. And I think, often when I'm having conversations with an older person and I'm asking, just generally about them and where they live and family, and they'll say, yeah, I've got family and they're fantastic, my family. They're doing really, really well, but they're very busy. It's a modern day life, isn't it? It must be hard for you. It wasn't like that when I was young. Do you know what I mean? I don't like to ask. I don't like to bother them, actually, but they're brilliant. They're doing really well. And I think, this is part of the problem that we have today. And I suppose we campaign on that. We raise awareness. And the Share What You Love campaign, which we've just launched, if you'd like to tweet along with us, I think that's just encouraging folk to just take a moment in their busy lives and just have a think about what it means to be lonely, and that actually to kind of just go out, do a favourite activity, maybe a hobby, just a coffee, visit your grandparents. Just spending some time with an older person is such a valuable thing to do. And actually, when we do it, we also remember how much we get from it as well. So there's a number of issues that we campaign on. I mean, we've also been very vocal about the BBC's decision to introduce a mean-tested TV licence. I mean, you'll sort of remember in my earlier slide that, kind of half of over 75s rely on the TV as a main form of company. So this really isn't the way to go. And I'd also just like to, I've put this slide in because I think the other thing that AIDS Scotland wants to do is kind of just lead on the conversation about ageing. We need to be talking about getting older before we get much, much older. And actually, we are now delivering these interactive workshops in communities and in the private sector, working in partnership with companies, employers that want to be age aware in the workplace. Sometimes you feel you have to retire because you either work Monday to Friday or you retire. It doesn't have to be like that if we have employers that want to have the conversation with you. They value your contribution, they value your wisdom and experience. And actually what they want to be saying to you is, how can we keep you? Would you like to drop to maybe 2 days a week, 3 days a week? Would you like to work at home on a Wednesday? I know you've got caring responsibilities for an elderly parent. Those are the sorts of conversations we want to encourage in the workplace. And also we want individuals themselves to think about post-retirement. For every person that has a whole timetable of things that I'm planning to do when I sort of reduce my hours at work, there is somebody else that wakes up on the Monday morning after the farewell party on Friday and goes, okay, what now? What next? What am I going to do? So I think we need to think about that. We need to start the conversation. So what else does AIDS Scotland do? Well, it's very important, and HIV Scotland will absolutely understand that part of our role is making sure that older people have their say on the things that matter. We believe at AIDS Scotland that Scotland has the opportunity to lead on loneliness and isolation. And we need to ask our ministers and our parliamentarians to actually really put a critical eye on their strategies and make sure that things are connected and integrated, because there's no point in us telling Jenny, who lives in a village, 10 miles outside of Wick that there's a fantastic lunch club running 5 days a week, and since she lost her husband, it could be a really good idea for her to get along when her bus service only runs twice a day, and one is at 9 o'clock in the morning and one is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, mainly hitting the commuting belt. So, it's pointless. So, transport actually is a really good example of the role that our fantastic policy and comms team have to play in influencing strategy. And in actual fact, HIV Scotland worked closely with Transport Scotland to make sure that over 500 people from Orkney to Dumfries were involved in consultation around the National Transport Strategy. And it's out at the moment. The consultation period doesn't finish until the 28th of October, so if you haven't, then please do respond. So the next thing that HIV Scotland I think is important is information, advice and friendship. Now, HIV Scotland runs a helpline. It's available to all older people, families, carers. It's a free phone. You can phone up about anything. We will talk to you about your benefit entitlements. We'll talk to you about your care home rights. We'll talk to you about your housing, your heating, your worries about scams, and we'll talk to you about legal issues such as power of attorney. Now, I'm not going to talk specifically about the impact of poverty in relation to loneliness and social isolation, but you could have a TED talk that says poverty is literally killing us. And certainly what we know is if you've lived most of your life in Morningside, the odds, nothing against Morningsiders here, the odds are that you're going to live a lot longer than if you've lived your life in Loch End or Wrestle-Rig. Poverty has impacts on health and well-being. And I'm saying that because I'm very proud of the fact, actually, that the HIV Scotland helpline put an extra £587,000 back in the pockets of older people through unclaimed benefits. So please, if you're working with older people, get them to give us a ring and let's make sure that they're getting everything that they're entitled to. Now, the other thing, specifically in relation to loneliness, is our community connecting service. And I'm just going to...
Yes, it was just feeling isolated, especially where I'm living at the moment.
Okay.
And I have difficulty with IT stuff. And, it was just a general... things were getting me down a bit, to be honest. I do suffer from anxiety. And I just wondered what kind of help, if any.
So, our community connecting service, manned primarily by volunteers, is to do just that. It's to connect people, older people in the community, to the activities and services in their area. And, what's great is that often those callers that come to community connecting have been identified by our helpline advisors. It's reading between the lines of a conversation when you're doing a benefit check. It's picking up on the fact that actually the person that's called feels very lonely, a bit depressed, recent bereavement. And this is more than just a signposting service, because it's about the encouragement. Get yourself along. Do you need to know the bus times? Give me a minute. I'll get you the local bus and the bus time. And then it's about the follow-up calls, the befriending aspect of it. Did you manage to get along? No, what was stopping you? So great service, volunteers, as I say, we have got our community connecting coordinator, but we're very proud of that service as well. So, let me see.
I'll go through all other places.
Sorry, I'll just skip that one. So, healthy, active ageing. I'm not going to say too much about this, but Jenny Ackland, one of my colleagues, allied health professionals, I love this quote. that she said, I had to write it down. And she said, the joy of getting older is being able to do the things you've always enjoyed doing and all the things you still want to do. And, we can't ignore it. Our health it's priceless, isn't it? At all stages of our life. But what I'm really it's interesting with HIV because we're going to move towards really giving a spotlight on functional fitness. We've got something called a functional fitness MOT, and this particularly focuses on balance, strength and flexibility, because I don't know about you, but if people start talking to me about physical activity, I just see the gym and I see running shoes, and I keep saying I'm great, my knees don't hurt because I never did any of that. But, we do need to be flexible, and we do need balance, and we do need to be able to take, get the top of the jar off our, Branston pickle as we age. And actually, Jenny and Yolanda have really frightened me, because apparently we can be going along going, oh, great, it's good, it's all good. And then we wake up literally one morning and we're finding it difficult to bend down and get our shoes on and do our shoelaces up. So it's it can really creep up on you, this one. And if we can't get our shoes on, we're in problems if we live alone. So really important, healthy active ageing. We're very involved in getting those messages out and making it fun. I think that's the main thing. And letting people know, as Jenny says, Fiona, if you just stand on one leg whilst you're scrubbing your teeth, that will start to improve your balance. So very small changes can make a real difference. Okay. So, community. I'm really proud of the fact that I left this till slide 9, because the clue's probably in my job title, Director of Community Services. I am passionate about the role that communities play in tackling loneliness and isolation. Indeed, the national strategy recognises that it is communities that are tackling social isolation and loneliness on a daily basis. And actually, at HIV Scotland, we have what we call our community development team. They're located across Scotland, and their role is to support community groups and small charities and organisations that are delivering services to older people. And it's really important because it's really tough, isn't it? It's really tough out there at the moment if you're a community group delivering services and activities. First of all, you might not actually belong to an infrastructure or a charity at all. You might be completely volunteer-led. Just think of the challenges around governance, constitution, GDPR legislation, health and safety, risk assessment. Isn't everyone struggling with money? But our smaller groups and charities, money is vital for them to continue delivering their services. So we need to support them. What grants are out there? What might you be able to tap into? How do you write a grant application? Succession planning. Particularly in rural parts of Scotland, we have, the chair is 86. And they're still delivering the lunch club in Dunoon 5 days a week for local older people. Who's coming up? It almost becomes a bit of a burden, that responsibility, as we age ourselves. So community, really important, and you couldn't talk about community without talking about our volunteers, could you? Volunteering, they are fantastic. I think the other thing about volunteering is how much the volunteers get from it. Volunteering helps you tackle your own sense of loneliness and isolation. And when I was at the Ripple, we ran a community cafe, and I remember one of our volunteers, she kept on filling in for us. We were going through a bit of a difficult staffing period, and I said to her, I really feel we're starting to maybe take advantage of your goodwill and nature here. And she said, Fiona, you've no idea. The Ripple has literally saved my life. It sounds so dramatic, doesn't it? But it was so heartfelt, you know. So volunteering, let's celebrate our volunteers. Let's invest in our volunteers. Let's not just have them as the add-on policy and thought at the end of the day. And I'm coming to the end. So nearly there. I can't leave without talking about partnership working. Obviously, it was great to talk about HIV Scotland, what we're doing, or giving you a flavour of what we're doing, but we couldn't do it in isolation. The name of the presentation is Tackling Loneliness Together. You know, since I've been at HIV Scotland now about 9 months, gosh, I'm just so excited at the breadth of our partner, you know, the range of partners that we're working with. I need to say immediately that our key partners are always our older people. They're the people that help us design and deliver our services, but we have our third sector colleagues. We work closely with universities and academics. They often are externally evaluating us as well, which is good. Robust evaluation, we like that. We're into the private sector now in terms of our workplace workshops. So, you know, we know, don't we? Co-production, collaboration, sharing of knowledge, sharing of assets. It's the only way to go. Okay, finally, I'd really just like to share with you that in 1993, when I moved up to Scotland without a job, why wouldn't you, and followed a pal up who was starting a postgrad degree at Edinburgh University, that I discovered this wonderful place called Milestone House. And I had left Lewisham Hospital to travel up to Scotland, and I worked as a charge nurse at Milestone House, and that was a period when young men and women were still dying of AIDS, and antiretroviral therapy was very new. We were still doing clinical trials back then. I remember the regimes were just so difficult to comply with, so many tablets, the size of the tablets. So this is really close to my heart, actually, and it's just wonderful that we're actually having a seminar today that's talking about HIV and ageing and getting older. But I know that there will be new challenges. You know, this is, to a degree, uncharted territory, new territory, and I'm really, really pleased now that I'm here and I can hear my co-presenters and learn a little bit more about what that looks like for somebody that's HIV positive. Thank you.
Fiona, thank you so much for that wide-ranging presentation. And just reflecting on your final remarks, it was how I opened the first seminar, is to consider the journey we have travelled on in 26 years, where we are now in a position, where the welcome position, where our challenge is not to be able to prolong the lives of individuals or to stop people dying, but how we make sure they have maximise their quality of life as they age. There was a huge number of themes covered there, and it would be very difficult to sort of distill them down, but we do have a few minutes in hand. So I just wonder if anyone has any questions that they would like to put to Fiona, or any comments or reflections. Obviously there'll be time later on, but if there's anything anyone would like to say immediately, please, feel free. No? Oh.
I've got a question about gender, in terms of men getting older and women getting older. Do you find through HIV Scotland there's any kind of, do you have to kind of tackle that a different way, or?
I think the men's shed movement would be a really good, I'm a great believer that we should have gender-specific spaces. I think that it's all about choice. I believe in women-only spaces, and I think men-only spaces are just as important. And you know, the growth, which we, you know, we're very proud at HIV Scotland to have been in there at the beginning, actually supporting and enabling the growth of the shedders movement. And they're all very individual, the men's sheds. I mean, they have their own identity. And I've visited many of them. They're amazing places and spaces. and it's a really safe space, trusting space for older men to get together, spend time socially, but also to talk about the, some of the worries and concerns they're having around their health or their recent loss. So yes, I think there are, yes, I think, absolutely gender plays a part in how we experience getting older. European football, I've got to talk about awful football as well. I mean, the way football is amazing. So yes.
I'm kind of thinking about sort of, kind of traditionally men finding it a bit more difficult to ask for help.
Yes.
In terms of going to the GP or around isolation or loneliness. So do you find you have to target differently to engage with men, or do you find it's actually quite easy?
I suppose in terms of doing,
I'm really thinking that I'm stereotyping madly here.
No, well, I think we do have to target. I think the Veterans Project would be. No, it's not that we don't have women who are veterans either, but we got involved in the Unforgotten Forces Consortium, which was specifically targeted at older men and older veterans. And I think there's an awful lot of learning in that, actually, because one of the things HIV Scotland developed our allied health professionals is a wonderful activity called body boosting bingo, and it's available now on a DVD, a USB. Please go to our website. It's a great activity based on bingo that's about strength, balance and flexibility. But our veterans hated it, do you know what I mean? It wasn't for them. So I think you're right, we do have to think about gender when we're thinking about the design and delivery of services, when we're thinking about the spaces we need to go to consult with older men, and when we think about how we might engage them in things like physical activity and well-being, because they'll have maybe different ideas about what that looks like and what they want to take on. So I think it's
I think it was an excellent question, and I've experienced firsthand seeing the work of an excellent men's shed in my own constituency in Barhead, and the conversations I had with many of the men who go along were really quite moving, because perhaps they had lost friends, perhaps their spouse or partner had died, and what they'd say to me is, "Son, if it wasn't for this, I'd either be at home watching the TV or in the pub." And there's a well understood, I think, phenomenon now of the Glasgow man, of the West of Scotland man, and all the attendant physical and mental health conditions that can present. And I've found that not only does men's engagement with Men's Shed help to tackle that, but it enables them to start having conversations that I don't think they would necessarily be able to have in any other forum, and that leads them on to go and engage with other services. So Men's Shed themselves, yes, they actually do something positive, but would lead and often to more positive outcomes and help to sort of kickstart people on a very positive journey, and that's something that I've seen firsthand. I just wonder if anyone else has had any kind of engagement with Men's Sheds, or because of course they're called Men's Shed, but it's not just men who go to them now. They're very open and inclusive. Some of them. Yeah. Great. Well, so there will be an opportunity later on to explore some of these themes during the workshop. However, we'll move on now to our next speaker.